Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leathertainment podcast. Today we have Deborah Taylor from the Sustainable Leather Foundation. She's the managing director there. We're going to talk about the sustainability of leather, and we are going to debunk some of the myths, lies gaining traction in the main market today, showing leather as a bad material to us, which is absolutely not true. Deborah has been in leather industry for such a long time, and we would like to welcome her and have her introduce herself and her story with leather. Deborah, why don't you introduce yourself?
Great. Thanks, Tanner. And I'm really glad to be here with you today. Um, yeah, I'm the managing director of the Sustainable Leather Foundation. I set the foundation up in 2020 because I felt that the industry really needed an organisation that would support the best practice and would support the truth and the data around the leather industry that's quite often misrepresented. I previously managed the Leather Working Group for 5 years before I set the foundation up. And we have a really simple approach to what we do. We want to create a transparent platform that allows any organisation in the leather industry to participate at a rate that suits them. So you don't have to do it all at once. It's all about demonstrating what you can, when you can, and we support you to continue that improvement ongoing. The industry is sustainable at its heart, but we do still need to make some improvements around some of our outputs and some of the impacts of our production, but we're working on it as an industry. And actually, we're one of the few industries that is holding ourselves to account to be sustainable and to become more responsible as we grow and as we learn more, and we're all learning more every day. So that's the aim of the foundation, is to support that improvement and the industry as a whole.
Thank you for that intro, and thanks for setting up this foundation because it's a huge need. As you said, most of the time it's misrepresented. The sustainability and the good leather industry is doing for all of us and the environment is not presented. And on the other hand, some alternative materials present leather as a bad option to sell more of their own goods, which with a lot of information that is not showing the whole picture. And unfortunately, they're powerful and their claims getting traction in the main market these days. Especially just last month, we heard that Apple's announcement they are moving away from leather. I was absolutely blown away by the fact that they didn't take the time to do their own research and just take main market trends and claims and make such a big decision as a huge company and creating a big impact. I think we're going to be regretful for going forward. So what do you think about that? Apple and Tesla, these huge names abandoning leather and marketing this as a great sustainable or green initiative. Like, what's your opinion on this?
Well, I think it's definitely the wrong decision. Let's just put it out there. It's short-sighted, and it shows a lack of thorough due diligence on the part of Apple and the guys that made that decision ultimately. I think with all these things, they can be smoke screens. You know, leather quite often gets a bad rep, and it gets that because it's a low hanging branch. So if you think about the automotive industry, if you think about the electronics industry, there are far more damaging materials that they have no choice, they have to use, that have far greater consequences than leather, you know, across a number of areas of social and environmental responsibility. So if they can show this virtue signalling through something like leather, which isn't an essential component,
Right.
then it takes the spotlight away from those essential components that are far more damaging than the leather. You know, so
Smart.
sometimes I think it's a bit of a smokescreen. I also think quite often it's a bit lazy. They jump onto this bandwagon of, oh, you know, leather must be harmful for the environment or it must be harmful for animals, without really doing their own due diligence on it. So some of it is laziness, and I think some of it is a smokescreen. And at the end of the day, they are profit-driven organisations. And if they can charge you the same for an inferior product that costs them less, then they're winning and the consumer and the environment are losing.
Well, super well explained. I think three great reasons for them to do it. It's cheaper, more
Mm.
profits. Laziness, we all have that. If there's an easier option, we'll go with that. And that illusion of, we're doing our part by showing the scapegoat here as the leather, but
Yeah.
do all other stuff, people not realizing, taking the attention, that illusionist game. Absolutely smart. But as consumers, we need to know better and do better so they cannot get away with these um, easy and lazy solutions that's eventually not right for the environment and for the end users as well. So some of the reasoning they hide behind are, it's not good for animals. Animals are killed for their leather. It's one of the uh, big questions and confused parts that I read online. Animals are being killed for their leathers. I'm never buying another leather product again. I'm gonna save a cow. So how true is that statement, or what's the false part of it?
I mean, it's not true. The 99% of the leather that we use for products, whether those products are automotive upholstery or whether they are garment and footwear products, come from animals that have been raised primarily for their meat and dairy products. There are a very, very small percentage of products that are made from exotic, but exotics have very definite laws and regulations wrapped around them. So there can be no exploitation even of the exotics market because it is so heavily regulated. You can't export exotics without a license, so it is really heavily regulated. Outside of that, everything else is coming from livestock, which we need as a part of our natural biosystem. If we don't have livestock roaming the earth, then we will kill the earth. We don't have enough arable land to support a completely plant-based diet. That's just fact. And if we tried to feed our entire world population on a plant-based diet, we would soon rob the earth of the nutrients to keep sustaining us. So the animals provide a really important part to our ecosystem. It is our responsibility to make sure that we look after those animals in life, and those animals then look after us in death. And actually that wrapper of that animal, that hide and skin, converting that into a useful everyday material that is durable and beautiful is actually the responsible thing to do. It's the sustainable thing to do. We have to take care with our production, that we make the leather transformation as sustainable as possible, but the actual raw material is inherently sustainable and it supports a much bigger ecosystem. So the argument that we're killing animals for leather is no argument. It just isn't a fact. It's not happening, full stop. And the fact that we do convert that, what would otherwise be a waste product of the meat industry, into a beautiful new product is actually the best example you can get of sustainability, upcycling, recycling, using every part of the animal to honour it in its death, because it's looking after us and it's supporting our livelihoods as humans.
Absolutely. So this there's two sides of it equally important. Definitely, it's a complete lie. Animals are not killed, and so many of us eat meat. And I totally respect if you don't and you have a vegan lifestyle, but I don't think this at a global scale is changing to entire vegan-based diet. And as long as that's not the case and you're eating meat, the responsible action to use leather, so the leather created by your meat consumption is now a durable material, not creating demand for plastics or other fabrics, which is equally, maybe even more impactful on the environment in the holistic life cycle. So it's not only animals not killed for their products, but actually they provide you with an extra bonus material you can use to dress yourself or organize and protect your belongings as a bag in the very, very durable and luxurious format. Very well said. So
Mm.
I hope we can get this message, as many people as possible. So these, um, unfortunately, very common myths are going away from the market, and big companies actually make the right decision going forward. There is another side of the argument. Then the tanning industry, the tanneries are polluting. It's not environmentally sustainable practice. And I'm being coming from the industry since childhood. I've been tanning leather, and I know ups and downs of it. I know it's not perfect, and I know industry is working really hard, and that's what your foundation is completely about. So
Mm.
what can you tell us, the consumers, about tanning and its impact on the environment today, and what are we doing for tomorrow?
Yeah. So we are an old traditional industry, and I think if you go back to our beginnings, it was a very natural process. It was done with natural tannings and barks, and it was a very natural process. As the industry has grown, um, and certainly as advances in technology became known, it became an industrialized industry where machinery, chemicals were all adopted to create leather in a more efficient way that would be more durable and long lasting and would suit a number of different applications. Within that, there is pollution potential and there is impact on our environment and our outputs and our emissions. One thing I can say is that I've travelled the world and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to tanneries. Okay, you can't whitewash it. You can't say every tannery is amazing. But equally, you cannot say that every tannery is terrible, because we have some first class facilities out there now that are reaching towards being net zero if they're not already, and that are really concentrating hard to do everything they can in as sustainable a way as possible. So they are leaving as little footprint as possible on our environment. There are others that are on their journey. They're not there yet, but they are making constant improvements. And the more that we learn about what's possible, the better we get as an industry. And we are striving for that. I was just in Bangladesh a couple of weeks ago, visiting a tannery over there. I was part of a show that they were hosting, and then did some visits. And yes, there is work to be done, and yes, there is still pollution. But what I would say to the consumer is there is pollution and emissions with every single industry and every single product. And if you think that your plastic replacement for leather is less polluting, you're really barking up the wrong tree. Most of those plastic products will be far more polluting in the long term than leather is. And actually, nobody's holding those plastic production facilities to account. Leather is held to account all the time. And that's why we set the foundation up, because we need to have the data. We need to have the facts to be able to answer those critics that keep coming at us. And so we're working really hard as an industry to do that. But nobody's holding those plastic companies to account in the same way. And nobody's taking into account the raw material extraction for that petroleum-based product. So yes, there are things that can be improved in many regions, but we've got some great examples now across the board, whether I'm in Italy or China or South America or North America, I can find first class examples of what a tannery should look like and how it should be run. I visited one in Mexico actually just a couple of weeks ago, and it was fantastic. This facility was purpose built just 5 years ago for its production. So it is efficient, it's slick, it's well run, but crucially they've maintained it so it still looks as good today as it did years ago. Now, you can't compare that facility with a facility that's been going for 100 years, that's in a really old building, that has grown over time and has bolted things on, that can't be as efficient as the purpose built, but they're still working and they're still trying to drive through those efficiencies where they can. And sometimes that takes planning and strategic
Right.
profitability, investment to be able to deliver on those things. But the industry's getting
Absolutely.
there.
I think the investment part is I can wait until.
I was going to say, can I just get
Yeah.
rid of it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. By the way, just upon ending our last answer, Deborah got a phone call, and we want to bring it up because it's a perfect example of what we're talking here. And I would like Deborah to pass us the story. Like, what was the call about?
So that it was just a call from an everyday consumer that I've never spoken to before. And he just introduced himself and he said, I am a frustrated customer who is trying to find responsible leather in the UK. Can you help me?
So this question has so much we need to unpack here, right? People love leather. They know it's good. I think we inherently know good and bad things. We look at plastic, we're like, okay, I'm not really connecting to this, but okay, I'm gonna use it. Everybody does. We look at leather, wow, okay, this looks really good, and we've been using it as humankind all the time we existed, and I wanna like it, but I don't know enough. Nobody tells me enough. It's not labeled accurately, and I'm frustrated now. So whose fault it is, and how we're gonna help this person?
Oh, you see, it's such a big question, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm obviously going to get back in touch with him
Please
after
do.
we've finished, and I can let you know how it goes. But it's one of the reasons why at the foundation we have a consumer hub on the website, because we want people to ask us questions. We want them to understand. One of the big questions we have with brands is, how much information does a consumer really want? And when I say that, it's they don't want to know the name of Daisy the cow in the field. That's too much information, it's too close, and they don't need that. What they do need to know is that within industry, we know that, and that we have got responsible supply chains in place, and that we are being responsible as a brand with the products that we're then putting on sale for consumers. So that consumers don't have to think about it. If you think about it, this gentleman should not have had to have made that phone call.
Right.
That gentleman should be able to just go into any store and see an article and think, I can trust this brand. The problem we've got is we've lost that trust. And you touched on something earlier as well about having a choice. We do have to provide a choice for people that have a lifestyle. So if they choose to have a vegan lifestyle, or even if they just don't want leather as a lifestyle choice, we have a duty to provide for those members of our society. What we shouldn't be doing is trading off leather in order to sell a fake product that is inferior. A, because those consumers are going to get an inferior product. And B, because the inference is that leather is wrong, and it's not. And that's why consumers are confused. They don't know. They're bombarded with all this negative messaging, and they don't know how to trust the products that they see in store. And quite often, they don't know whether they're looking at a real leather article or a fake leather article. And I know that's a lot of the work that you do, is,
Oh my God.
taking these things apart and looking at them and going, really? And I've got a great example about that as well. I bought my husband a pair of leather slippers and they've started peeling. And I'm now looking at them and I'm going, these aren't what I bought, So,
Right.
and that's me. And I know my stuff when I'm looking at leather, but I bought these slippers online and okay, so there you go. There's maybe the moral of the story. Don't buy online, but they haven't lasted. So yeah, as far as the consumer is concerned, I think we've done a terrible job as responsible brands and retailers in giving good, credible information that is not greenwashing, that isn't confusing and that isn't giving them partial truths about products. And because of all of that, we're in the situation we're in now, where consumers really don't know.
That's right. And yeah, it is a huge work, I think, waiting the leather industry to redo that, rebuild that trust, education, help consumers identify what they're looking at, how it's made, as simple as little as possible. As you said, they don't need to know every detail, but
Yeah.
coming up with solutions like LWG, which you say you managed for 5 years, it's a great sticker. When I see that we are buying our leathers from LWG certified tanneries, now I'm a little bit more relieved because, as you've seen, um, I have been in very different countries, seeing a lot of different tanneries, and now I know a leather can be harmful if it's all about
Yeah.
cost saving, coming one of those developing countries in the very far corner, nobody sees and touches to them. They do whatever they want, and it's not good. So I don't want a leather coming from there. But when I see that LWG Gold Certificate tannery, and I'm like, okay, somebody went there for me. Well, actually, it goes every 2 years, and then reassess everything they do, and then reissue the certificate. So I'm relieved. At least the tanning part is good. Most likely the supply chain, the animals, welfares, and other things are good. So I'm very happy to see these labels and authentication or trust certificates are being developed. But I think
Mm.
there's still a lot more ways to go communicating this to people, like what they are, what they mean, so they can seek for it. And then once they see it, they trust to it.
Yeah, exactly. So, Leather Working Group, as a great example, um, is a mark of good environmental practice in a facility. Um, there is limitations to what it can safeguard against, obviously, and the medal awards aren't really understood well, and don't really translate to the consumer very well. So yes, translating what that means to a consumer is important. At the foundation, we've gone a step further because we've added the social responsibility and the good governance. So ethical business practices, animal welfare, all of that is wrapped up within the work that we do, as well as the environmental. What we really hope is that in the fullness of time, all you'll need is that Sustainable Leather Foundation logo on that product, and you know you can trust it. You know they're being measured against the 3 pillars of sustainability, and you know that they're also being measured on other product claims, like things like chrome-free tanning
Right.
technology, or if it is leather that we know has come as a byproduct from the meat industry, it can be certified as a byproduct. So
Right.
there are lots of additional deforestation. If we know that this entire value chain holds no deforestation risk in its chain, we can give the deforestation seal as well. So we're layering on all sorts of additional criteria that are all designed at the end of the day to give the consumer a window to that good practice. And we provide QR codes actually for all of our partners. So you put that QR code on your product, and if a consumer clicks on that QR code, they can get the most up-to-date information for that value chain through a connected series of dashboards. And they don't have to see all of the dashboards, they just get the end result, which that this is a responsible value chain from farm to finished product, because we're not just working with the tanneries either. So we work with the product manufacturers, we work with the chemical companies, the machinery companies. We're just creating our dashboard for the meat packers at the moment, but we're trying to connect that responsibility together instead of just working in silos, because again, that supports that end consumer information.
That is such an enormous task, knowing that how complex this entire supply chain ecosystem from the meat producers down to chemicals, machineries, and to the end leather goods manufacturers to detect, track, certify, and simplify it to maybe a logo or a little mark. So
Mhm.
consumer don't have to worry. is an enormous work. So I totally commend you what you're trying to do there. It's absolutely needed to reassure the market about leather's goodness. Because on the other hand, let's talk about like what happens when people badmouth leather, when Apple abandons leather. Let's go from that example. Now, Apple is selling millions of phones, right, every year, and people buy phone cases, and they said they're not going to use leather, so they need to use an alternative. And this is not only Apple. There's the third-party vendors that make cases that sell a lot more cases than Apple does on Amazon and everybody. Now, Apple give them an excuse to use a cheaper material as better than leather, and they're gonna jump on it. They will go use the cheapest plastic PU materials, cover it, make it look like leather, and they will probably say now it's vegan leather because Apple is all on the same boat, and we are all happy buying a cheaper, inferior material. It's going to break, go down the drain, and stay in the earth for I don't know how long, and it's not going to degrade itself. So this is what happens when Apple decides moving away from leather, but we're all okay with it. And why do you think it is we're okay with plastic without seeing a certificate that was sustainable, without seeing a certificate of, environmental friendliness? We automatically assume plastic is okay. Why is it?
Exactly. That's the irony, and that's what I touched on earlier when I said nobody is holding the plastic guys to account. Nobody is asking them to prove their due diligence across any of their production. So it's a real misdemeanor. It's a real conundrum, and I don't understand it, if I'm perfectly honest. What I do know is that we do have a couple of brands who are going to continue to make leather Apple cases, but they will make them under their own brand, LVMH being one of them. Okay, it won't have the Apple logo on it, but it'll have the LVMH logo on it, and it will still fit your Apple phone. So we do still have some good, responsible brands who are not playing this silly game. They are still maintaining the integrity of purpose that leather has over the plastics. I think we sleptwalked into the use of plastics in everyday life over a couple of decades, and people were warning about the dangers of plastic and nobody paid any attention. And then we got some of the Asian countries particularly that just flooded the market, because plastic gave them the ability to produce almost anything, and we just got flooded with it. And it's almost like even when you don't like something to begin with, the more you see it, the more you just adjust. You just adjust, don't you? I remember when I was a girl, the introduction of polyester and nylon, and it was seen as the poor person's alternative to real fabric, to cotton and to silk and to real materials. And so, yeah, that was seen as a poor person's alternative. But over time, and I think through my late teens, the high street fashion stores became more prevalent on our high streets, and we started to go and shop because we wanted to, not because we had a need for something. And so suddenly the choice became more abundant, and we became saturated to the point where we no longer looked at a label to see what the material content was. We looked at the product on the hanger. Do we love it? And we became emotional shoppers, and we started buying things because we just liked the look of it. And we lost the value of the content of the material. And I think some of the last bastions of that have been, again, if we look at auto and look at the automotive sector, leather has always been synonymous with luxury in car making.
Yeah.
You want a high-end car, you want it outfitted with leather. And that was always the same, and it hasn't really changed. The biggest change maker that threatens that is Tesla. because they just straight away off the bat said no leather. We've had other auto companies that have tried to do that and have come back to leather. And we have other automotive OEMs who put in fake leather, but they sell it as if it's leather. And that's wrong. And that's where we get this decay over a period of time that we just become accustomed to it. And that's what the brands hope that we will continue to do, you know, because they can make bigger profits.
Exactly. That's the motivation. It's cheaper material. One thing I might understand in an electric vehicle, the weight factor. You know, you might get a
Mm,
lighter material in the non-leather fabrics, but that's a separate story. It's cheaper, it's lighter. Okay, it makes sense, but it's not a vegan leather. It's nothing about veganism. It's nothing about environmentalness.
no.
It's just pure greenwashing. What used to be called plastic and PU, now you're trying to um,
Yeah.
paint people. Oh, this is an environmentally friendly object. It's absolutely straight out lying to people shamelessly, and I hate Tesla for that. I love the car. I love the company. Elon Musk obviously is a great entrepreneur. As
Yeah.
long as they keep doing it, I will never buy a Tesla. Like if I buy it, I will put my leather on it. So I'm not gonna sit on that plastic. So, but it, I have one theory that we are comfortable with plastic being everywhere. Uh, the oil industry is powerful. You know, it's one of the most powerful, financially abundant industries of all time, and
Yeah.
they know how to manage their life cycle. You know, they know the consumption of oil is going to go down, electric vehicles and this and that. So they need some alternative ways to turn oil into cash. So plastic is a good way, right? And
Yeah.
all kind of different plastics going into all sorts of life. That's a great revenue stream for them. And you need to make people comfortable with it. So I think there is a huge PR campaign whenever it started. This
Mm,
recycling and recyclableness of plastic is a huge brainwashing happened on people,
yeah.
which doesn't reflect the fact that most of the plastic we put on those bins are not recyclable. It's not going to be recycled because of the complexities. Maybe 10% will be, and I don't even know if the entire operation is going to worth the effort of recycling at that point. A lot of people are questioning and researching that at this point, but
Hmm.
that whole notion and habit of rethinking, oh, I got the plastic, I'm going to throw it in the blue bin and it's good now, I feel great about my plastic usage, made us comfortable with plastic. What do you think? You think that could be one of the campaigns they're playing here?
Yeah, I think you're spot on because the reality is that even the recycling creates emissions, right? So
Absolutely.
it's still a process in itself. And I don't know whether you've seen now, but the plastic water bottles have the caps that don't pull off all the way. They kind of have a thicker piece of plastic to hold that collar onto the bottle. And apparently, this is a good thing because it means that the caps don't get chucked away separately to the bottle and for whatever reason. But in actual fact, when it comes to recycling that, they're two different types of plastic. So the top has to be removed from the bottle to be treated differently in the recycling. And actually, what we're finding now is that in many cases, it's using more consumption to try to recycle something than it is to use virgin plastic. So they're now making even that assumption that actually we're better to just keep creating new plastic because converting the old plastic to something new creates more emissions than just using the virgin material to begin with. So even that is counterproductive. But what consumers really have to think about is that word. They are a consumer, and how much they consume is and what they consume is really what makes the difference here. And they have to vote with their feet and their purchasing decisions, you know. And if they stop buying plastic products, then demand will go down and we'll see less production. But as long as consumers still have a dual kind of attitude, they have their beliefs, they have their ideals, but they don't follow through those ideals with their purchasing patterns. They still continue to consume as they always have done. And in that case, we have a disconnect. We need those things to come together. We should all consume a little bit less, is the reality of the situation. But there should be a return to natural, sustainable products rather than petroleum derivative man-made materials, because the natural materials are naturally sustaining.
Exactly.
Whether we're talking about cotton, okay, we have problems with cotton. You think about the farming element of that, and we have all sorts of organic cotton standards and things like that we have now. But all of those materials can be grown from our planet in the same way that livestock can. Petroleum extraction is not a renewable source, and it causes untold damage across so many parts of our natural ecosystem that it really severely impacts our planet's health. And the sooner we wake up to that and start working around that, the better. And I hold my hands up. We all do it. None of us are perfect. We're all consumers, but we do have to be a little bit more conscious of what we're consuming. And in false innovation, can I just say, innovation is a word that drives me crazy. If your innovation just creates a new problem, it's not innovation. It's false innovation. It's only real innovation if you are not creating a new problem in your attempt to solve the old problem. And all of these alternatives to leather just create new problems. And they don't give you the durability and strength of the original product.
Absolutely. Then you need to keep buying more and more. Instead of one bag lasting you 10, 20 years, you're going to go through 5 bags, all going to garbage and stay there because Mother Earth cannot destroy it like it can leather. So let's go to vegan leather now. It's a great point to get to that subject. What's vegan leather? So let me ask you that first.
Well, let's be honest, there isn't a vegan leather. Leather by its very definition originates from an animal, right? So a vegan product should not be termed leather to begin with. And that's the first thing and last thing that you need to think about it as a consumer. If they're saying it's vegan leather, read that it's plastic. There is no vegan leather. Now, I said earlier, I don't have a problem with people being vegan as a lifestyle choice. And I think that as a society, we have a duty to make sure that we provide for that lifestyle choice. But let's call a spade, and if it is an alternative material, let's call it the material that it is. When we look at vegan labels, the marketing departments of brands around the world have had an easy and free ride with this term vegan for the last 5 to 10 years. Everybody jumped on the bandwagon. The term vegan had a very righteous kind of understanding and recognition in the public consciousness. If you were a true vegan, you were very clean living, you were eating very organically, you weren't doing anything that would be of any detriment to the environment. That was the perception of a vegan, and veganism as a movement. Now, this virtue signaling of attaching that term to a product that is plastic suddenly makes that plastic product seem more appealing. Oh, if it's vegan, it must be good, right? And then, of course, conversely, oh, if it's leather, oh, it must be bad. So now we start building these little manipulations of perception with our consumers about what's good and bad. And when you add to that the innovative materials of the last few years, like mushroom leather, pineapple leather, cactus leather, you name it, there's been a few of them. All of these materials contain plasticizers of some form to give them any stability and durability, because there is no way you can take a mushroom from the ground and make it as robust as leather without a lot of manipulation and additives. I know some companies are doing great things with these additional materials, but let's not call them leather, because they are not leather. And you know, we have examples. Myco, the mycelium company, you know, they've not been able to get add-on funding, and the reason that they can't get the add-on funding is because the material doesn't work. It's great in a test facility, it's great for experimenting with a product design, but put that into real life production for real life use, it doesn't stand up, it doesn't work, it falls apart. And so lots of this investment, and this is where I get really frustrated, because huge amounts of money have been invested into these alternative materials. And I can't help but think, if those huge amounts of money were invested into the leather industry, we could make so many and faster improvements to our production methods to keep creating the beautiful material that leather is in a better way. And that's kind of hooked up with this innovation. Let's spend our energy, let's spend our money, and let's invest in the industry as it exists to make that industry better, to make that industry more sustainable, rather than keep trying to reinvent the wheel. You know, the wheel works, leather works, you know, let's not keep trying to reinvent it. We have a great material, let's look after it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree. And I think leather is innovating and trying because it has to. You know, we're not doing just because we are, as leather industry, you know, just completely self-motivated, because all the pressures from outside, these threats and misconceptions, force leather industry to, you know, wash itself off this things, true or false. But one thing I'm actually a fan of, like, in the search for that alternative for true vegan mindset lifestyle, as we said, some people has that righteous feeling lifestyle of being vegan, and I hate that their righteousness being taken advantage of, people labeling plastic with vegan now without doing
Yeah,
anything. Like, whatever was plastic just last month, today the guy figures out vegan works and puts vegan leather on it, and it sells more. This is absolutely, like, cunning. It should be
yeah,
criminal to my mind. But I know there are some honest companies trying to develop an alternative that looks like leather, but made mostly, even not possible fully, as plant-based materials today. I absolutely like to see that honest effort.
mm,
Try to see if you can make mushroom leather, if you can make apple leather, whatever leather. I know they will get better, they will improve. At least they can be a better alternative for vegan mindset people, knowing that it is truly a, a plant-based, at least most of it, coming from a source that's not good old plastic relabeled for your trendy views today. So
yeah,
I'm time to time I'm taking those items, I'm reviewing them, and I'm talking to makers of them. They started
yeah,
with only 30% plant-based material at the beginning, but they're moving towards 80% today. So it's good.
mm-hmm.
I think maybe they will figure out at some point a good leather-looking alternative for those people. But I don't see that as a threat to leather industry,
No.
because leather-loving people will never go for that anyways. It's for totally different mindsets, in my opinion.
I agree, and there is one well-known tannery that is now running a second production with an additional material. And actually, they don't call it an alternative material; they call it an additional material. So they're making
Complementary.
Yeah, their main material is leather, but they are also producing an additional material that suits the vegan market. And their rationale is perfectly valid. You know, their customer, their brands need to provide for both. So why shouldn't they produce the material for both? And because their main material is leather anyway, then they're doing it from not to replace leather,
Right.
but to be a side-by-side additional material that supports that vegan lifestyle. And you are right, you know, veganism has become almost like a dirty word now because of all this greenwashing, you know, and actually it is a shame for those that, and I know someone who is vegan but fully respects the use of leather because they
Right.
understand,
Understand.
yeah, they understand its place in our ecosystem, even though they choose not to eat meat and they choose to have a vegan lifestyle. That then they work in the leather industry. You know, you don't. The two things do not have to be mutually exclusive, um, and it's understanding that balance, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's a lack of understanding issue more than anything, especially for people who eat meat, like myself. Um, Sometimes they get on board with this claim, I'm gonna stop using leather, we're gonna save animals. Because no matter how many of us stop using leather, it's not gonna change the amount of cows raised by one because it's not the purpose. Leather is absolutely garbage, valueless if they don't have a demand, but meat demand is always there and it's the money, and when there is money, there is production. So that picture is not going to change. And if you're eating meat, you like it or not, creating leathers, you better use it. It's durable. You reduce the plastic by using leather, which is much more cleaner and responsible option. So
Yeah.
one other question here that I keep seeing these days from so many brands: recycled leather, upcycled
Mm.
leather, especially from leather brands. And Coachtopia is one of the initiatives recently.
Yeah. Yeah.
They say they have upcycled leather, they have recycled leather, which is a little bit confusing now. Even to me, I had to get one of their products, inspect to understand what they mean by all that stuff. My question to you is, can leather be recycled, or what's the next in leather's life cycle once we stop using a leather bag, and how does it go to the end of the life cycle of that product?
So this is again where leather hands down beats any plastic alternative because there are options, right? So there's a UK handbag brand that have a lifetime service centre where you can have your leather handbag refurbished to look brand new. And if you no longer want it, you can actually sell it back to them and they will give you a voucher to buy a new bag with. And then they put the second-hand one into their pre-loved section and they sell it on to a new home. If they get a handbag that is beyond repair, that really has seen better days, um, they can use that to create energy to produce the next bags of the future. So they've created a really circular approach to their production. You then have the fact that, and people talk about manufacturing leather to a certain lifespan, and I'm not so sure that I like that idea because actually one of leather's most sustainable attributes is its longevity. And I'll give you a lovely example. When I was in my 20s, and I'm in my 50s now, but when I was in my 20s, I had a black leather belt, nice wide belt with a brass buckle on it. And having had two children, this belt didn't fit me anymore. It wouldn't go around my waist. But I hadn't thrown it away. It was up in my wardrobe. And my daughter, a few years ago, came downstairs one day wearing a denim dress. And she went, "Mum, I really need a belt for this dress and I don't have anything that works with it." And I went, I do. And I went upstairs, got the belt, she tried it on, she loved it. She went, oh, can I have it? I'm like, yeah, of course you can. So she went to school wearing this belt, and all her friends were like, oh, love your belt. Where'd you get your belt from? And she went, oh, it's vintage. It was my mum's. So leather lives on from generation to generation. Now, I wouldn't have done that with a plastic belt, but
You can.
you look after, no, you can't. You look after your products. I've got shoes in my wardrobe that I've had for 20 or 30 years, you know, but I look after them. I pull them out every now and again and wear them and then put them back away again. You can't do that with plastic. No matter how good it is, you can't do it. So we have that option with leather, the longevity of it. And that leads you to be able to repurpose. So if you do have an old leather jacket that you no longer want, it can be repurposed into a handbag or into a belt or a couple of belts. I've got some footstools at home that have been made from old leather products that have been taken up and then tiny strips made and then latticed back together to create new products. So you have all sorts of options available for upcycling, recycling. Some of the work that's being done at industrial level is taking leather scraps and all the trimmings and the cuttings from production and then grinding that down, building it back together as a recycled leather. So it's like a constituted leather. There's lots of work going on in that space. So again, using as much as we can of the material to make really valuable products is possible. And again, not so possible with other materials. And if we do want to, depending on the tanning technology adopted to create the leather in the first place, it is possible to just put that leather back in the ground and let it decompose back into the environment because it comes from a natural product. Of course, you can't do that if you've used chrome tannage and other metals within it that might be damaging. You have to make sure that you're using chrome-free, veg-tanned leather. And we're only talking about the principal material, of course. You still have to deconstruct any other component parts before you do that. But it is possible to return the leather to the earth. And again, you can't do that with plastic. So
Yes. Well, there's so many angles of this longer life cycle as a material, leather being far more superior than plastic. First, being durable, reducing the number of things you will need. That's basically the slow fashion, consuming less. That's the beginning of being sustainable. That's the core mentality of it. And there's no better material fits to that description than leather. Well said. So thank you for clarifying that part. So let's talk about that thinning techniques now you mentioned as it came up. Chrome tanned, vegetable tanned, chrome free, metal free. What all these mean, and I know sometimes people are confused, especially with veg tan, vegetable tanned as a shortened version, they call it veg tan, and some people confuse that with vegan. It's like, I'm looking for vegan leather. They came to my store, for example, and I was like, we don't have that because that doesn't exist. Are you meaning veg tan, which is vegetable tan? It's like, yes, that one, with the barks. So can you explain a little bit more about those concepts?
yeah, so I mean, veg tanning, vegetable tanning, takes us right back to the beginnings of leather and the use of leather. It's using those natural extracts from bark and other natural materials to create a tanning solution that reacts with that hide, with that raw wrapper of the animal to make it stable and to give it the durability. In recent times, and we touched on this earlier, in recent times we've come up with more modern techniques that allow for much faster tanning. So veg tanning takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of space, but modern chrome tanning is fast, it's efficient, and it also produces leathers that up till very recently have been able to adapt for many more applications, whereas veg tanning is traditionally used still for things like shoe sole leather, the very heavy leather that you have on the bottom of a shoe, for example. And veg tanned leather also had limitations as to the colours that you could get from a vegetable tanned leather, whereas a chrome tanned leather gives you infinite opportunity for different colours, dyes and pigments to be added to it. In more recent times, vegetable tanning and other more natural tanning methods like zeology using zeolite, without getting too technical for the listeners, have made a difference and have made it possible to have really soft, supple leathers with some really lovely colours from other technology than just chrome. What I would say is that even with the vegetable tanning options that we've got, you can't do our entire inventory that we have for leather production using those veg tannings, because we'd kill the earth again. We don't have enough in abundance to service all of our production. So we have to find a balance. Chrome tanning in and of itself does not have to be harmful. The chrome that's used in tanning itself is harmless. But if the tanning process is incorrect, there can be a reaction, and that reaction can cause chrome 6 to form, and chrome 6 is the potentially harmful version of chrome 3, which is what's used in tanning. However, technology is such that we have such good measures in place for chrome recovery now, and for cleaning chrome in the wastewater, that it really doesn't have to be a problem. And that's not to say we shouldn't be continuing to look for alternative methods. But right now, what I suggest to people when I'm talking to them is choose the right technology for the application that you want. Because different technologies suit different purposes. You know this more than I do. And you've got other pluses and minuses for this as well. There's other pros and cons to this, you know, cost, time, all of those things have to be factored in alongside the product that you want to create, that end leather that you want to create, and the input material that you're using. You know, they're more suitable to different types of tanning. The industry is constantly innovating in this way, and there are always new technologies coming up. And that's, again, we go back to it, that's where we should be putting our investment into finding cleaner technologies, better ways of producing this beautiful material. And that's where we'll make the big wins.
I think so. Well explained. In a nutshell, wedge tan, chrome tan today, with all the advancements we had in chrome tanning, because we've been doing so often, so much, we learned and perfected the technique in a lot of modern tanneries. There's no danger to it as a technology, but sometimes wedge tan is a better choice if you're gonna make a stiffer bag that's gonna age into a patina and stuff like that. But if you're going for a fashion piece, probably you better use a chrome tan leather. So there is no one choice is superior to all. It depends what you're trying to do, what's the end user, what's the goal for the product. And those two are just one of the few things we can tan leather with: the zeolites, with the aldehydes, the oils, and so many different things we can tan leather with, depending on what we're trying to do. So I think as long as you are paying attention to the brand, maybe reading a little bit to the description of the product you're buying that talks about the leather, where is it coming from, the environmental and sustainable practices of it, it's always a good sign. I always say, people asking me like, how do I know I'm buying a good leather? Well, read a little bit into the details, because brands, artists, companies who are proud of their leather choice, which is careful with their leather choice, love to mention that in the description.
Yes.
Because I spent so much time going around the world finding this leather, you know, you can't shut me up about it when I'm trying to sell this product, because I want to say, this is what it is. That's why I go halfway around the world to buy this for you. So if you read that, little detail, this is LWG certified, it's, vegetable tanned, it's full grain. Read all these little details. I think this
Yeah.
is as best as we can to learn and ensure our leather choice is good, coming from a sustainable or responsible source, in my opinion today. But I want to end the conversation with going back to that question that your phone calling person asked, what the audience can do today to ensure they're getting a responsible leather. Like, what do they do to find it? Or when they're looking at something, what do they do to check if it is responsible before they make the purchase decision? I know we're not perfectly there yet, but what clues or hints you can give them today
Yeah.
that's doable?
I mean, you've mentioned one already. Most brands that are using responsible sources will be telling you about it somewhere. So if it's not on the label, it will be on their website. So that would be my first check. Look on the label and see if it does say Leather Working Group. See if it does say Sustainable Leather Foundation on it. If you've got a mark from an organisation like that, then you know that it's been audited. It's been certified for meeting expectations and standards. So that would be the first thing. The second thing would be ask questions. And this is probably the most important part. But I would say we need brands to educate their store staff in this, because in a store, big time. I was in a store, and actually I'm going to name them because I think it's worth naming them. I was in a store. I was looking for a pair of Birkenstocks in the summer, and we went into a store, and I saw a lovely pair, but they weren't leather. They were their leather alternative, and I can't remember what it's called now, but they have a material that looks similar to leather, but it's not. And so I went up to the salesman and I said, this is the style I want, exactly like this, but I want the leather version. And he went, no, this is leather. And I went, no, it's not. He said, yeah, no, it is. I went, no. He said, how do you know? So I then gave him a little demonstration of how I knew that this was not a pair of leather Birkenstocks. And he went away and he went, oh, it's the only material it comes in. I went, oh, okay, shame. I can't have these then. And I left the store. But this is a classic example. As a consumer, you need to be able to rely on the brand ambassadors, the people that are selling those products, to know what they're selling. And the problem is they don't anymore because those lines have been blurred. He thought it was a leather shoe, but it wasn't, you know. So
Unfortunately, that happens so often. I've been told leather for a lot of PU things, even I bought for reviews, and I tell them here, I share the story. It happened in the Mont Blanc. It happened in some Coach stores. The internal material, they've been telling it's suede and all that stuff. I was like, no, I asked them 5 times. I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure?
yeah,
Sometimes they don't know. They truly. Sometimes I think they're lying, so I can't be sure. But unfortunately, this is one of the things I don't recommend people to rely 100% on what you're told, because the education is not accurate at all times. But most of the time, the readings, the labels, and descriptions are accurate because it's written by the people who actually know, from the center or headquarters of the company who makes the product. There is a little bit more direct information coming to you. Reading is more reliable than asking a salesperson, in my experience so far.
absolutely. And actually, with the tightening up of greenwashing legislation, and the fact that a couple of big brands were taken to court this year and were found guilty of misleading claims and information, even more now you can be guaranteed that if they are putting it on a label, they have to be able to verify it. And with all the EU legislation that's coming into force in the next year, 2 years around due diligence, any claim that a brand wants to make in future, they will have to be able to demonstrate. So if you're seeing a claim on a product and you have any doubt about that claim, question it. And anybody can always come to us at the foundation, or they can go to you and say, hey, I think I've been duped, what is this, what's going on? Because I think the more that we do that, and the more that we hold these brands to account, the better we will be, the better shape we'll be in as a society, because it will stamp out that miscommunication, that misinformation, and that deliberate fudging of the lines, so that we think, oh, well, we're never going to find out, so we might as well not bother. We need to get away from that, so that we can trust our purchasing decisions, and the brands that we buy from.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you for all that you're doing for the industry and information you shared here. I always close with where our viewers can find information about leather and your foundation's offers, services. What are some sources they can go if they wanted to check?
There are a number of resources out there. There are organisations like Leather Naturally, for example, who are a great information source, and will always support with consumer facing messaging. They do a lot of great work. Of course, there's the Leather Working Group. We've talked about them already today. You can go on their website, and every tannery that they've audited is on their website, and you can see their base rate of attainment. You can go on our website on this, you just sustainableleatherfoundation.com. It's as simple as that. And we have a dashboard, and the dashboard is a transparency dashboard. It works on a really simple traffic light system. If it's grey, they haven't started working on that element yet. If it's orange, it's work in progress, but they haven't been audited against the standard yet. If it's green, they have got a third party audit, and that audit could be with Leather Working Group, it could be with Sustainable Leather Foundation, it could be with eCheck or one of the other certification companies. We allow equivalency on that dashboard. If it's red, it means they're failing the standard. And if they're failing the standard, that's going to be a regulatory requirement or a legal permission that they are not able to meet. So that could be something like their effluent treatment, and they're not meeting the parameters as set out in their operating permits. Then that would be a failure, rather than it being just something that they're not quite there yet, and then that would be a work in progress. So there's distinctions, but it's a really clear traffic light system that anybody can understand. And then of course there are country associations. Most countries will have a leather association that will be looking after the industry interests, but will also be looking after making sure that good factual information is in the public domain for consumers. So yeah, we have a lot of those associations. There's the International Council of Tanners. I could go on. There's the Society of Leather Technologists and Chemists, and all of these organisations and associations, their entire purpose is to support the industry and support consumers to make better choices. So yeah, there's a whole host of different resources.
I see. Well, thank you for sharing all that. We're going to put them on the screen here for curious viewers, and they can go find that information. And hopefully, this information will be growing, expanding within the industry, having us more transparency as you guys work towards it. I truly appreciate everything you do for us, for leather industry, and everything you shared today. Well, thanks for taking the time to be with us here today. I'll be reaching out for sure. Very nice to meeting you. Nice to having you
Thanks,
here.
Anna. Really good to talk. Thanks.